not the weather, generally cloudy today, spells of rain mainly in the south and west and Friday.
You're listening to Today on Radio 4, Charles Saint, over it's now 28 minutes to 8. Here is the summary of the news from James.
The Immigration Minister said the government is in the final stages of negotiating a new treaty with Rwanda, the country Abiy plans to send asylum seekers home. Robert Jenrick told the BBC it was absolutely critical that plans to Rwanda begin in the spring, despite the Supreme Court ruling yesterday that the schemes are lawful. The Labour leader Keir Starmer has expressed his regret at the loss of 8 of his shadow ministers and sacked or resigned last night over the party's stance on the Israel-Gaza war. In a major rebellion, a total of 56 Labour MPs supported an Assembly amendment backing a ceasefire in Gaza. One of the Labour rebels, Stella Creasy, told us advocating for a ceasefire was far better than remaining silent. The US President Joe Biden has begun his anti-corruption campaign and wrote measures to ease enforcement during Hungary's first talks in a year. Mr. Biden described the four-hour meeting in San Francisco as their most productive and constructive yet. Resume further communications between the nations and to tackle the third Vietnam continue from China to the US. BBC analysis shows that 2/3 of managers attempt to promote the US don't consistently meet safety standards, assessed by the health regulator. The majority of nations say technology has the worst safety ratings of all services acceptance tests. The world's first gene therapy aims to cure chemical disorders have been approved by new regulators in Britain. Juvenile sickle cell disease and thalassemia is the first treatment since it used an antibiotic and the contraceptive pill will be available to public pharmacies in England next month, pending a GP appointment. The new scheme will offer pharmacy first, but also sell treatments for many conditions. The sixth and third children was reported in a secret going to be run away almost 20 years ago, and it was a success. The way Lady Jerome
Jane, thank you. It's 25 to 8. A major bilateral meeting with Presidents Joe Biden of the US and Xi Jinping of China has taken place in San Francisco. They met and discussed a variety of issues for 4 hours. And after the summit, President Biden spoke about how he will aim to manage the relationship between the two countries. A short time ago, I spoke to editor Sarah Smith and asked her if much, if anything, was actually
It's the views of America really were totally devastated, and that was to re-establish a way of the US and American military being able to contact and talk to each other. China's been refusing to look at the vote basically for over a year now, and given that both of their militaries operate in and around the South China Sea, there is a real danger that some kind of accident can easily escalate into a conflict. And we're talking about fentanyl, which is causing, of course, one of the worst drug problems in America has ever seen. And China did agree to take action to stop the export of some of the chemicals and equipment that are used to make fentanyl, but Beijing said they have promised to take action about that before, and not very much happened. What are we expecting? So they have what senior administration officials here describe as a substantial exchange. And President Xi himself said that he thought this was the most potentially dangerous issue between the two countries, and as you say, it worries America a great deal too. The Chinese premier stressed his desire to see Taiwan reintegrated into China, and of course America has been really concerned about the massive military build-up that they've seen. But after the meeting, US officials said doesn't think President Xi is prepared for an invasion at the moment. And we talked about the conflict in Gaza and Ukraine as well, although apparently Mr. Biden was also talking at that point. He did say he would like to see China, which has significant influence with Iran, send a message to Tehran to stay out of the conflict. But he also said it wasn't really very clear what China's intentions were when it came to that.
This is arguably Sarah, the most influential financial country in the world, and this is a historic meeting. What was the episode of the Russians?
So it was the same as being considered in Iceland the last time they met, 1 year and 1 day ago in Bali, and they were certainly sitting much closer together with a few concerns. So they were only across one table from each other instead of outside to the other side of the room. It's the allied table that President Biden met at the end of the press conference made an offer that Xi that President Xi is a dictator. All the UN has clear criticism of the Chinese and coming after all massive foreign policy. They tried to get these two men and say work together. What do you think that we can say in this diplomatic way that
Sarah's been and I also spoke to Dr. Henry Wang, founder and president of the Center for China Institutions, think tank in China. I asked him if he believes in what a significant reset in the relationship between the US and China.
I think this is a very similar concern first to the stabilizing side of US relations. Because something since last year, China-US relations have grown a lot recently. Now, I think it's the oil
That's a very useful counter-argument to some of what we've been hearing here in the West. Dr. Henry Wang, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Let's turn to the papers now at 18 minutes to 8, and inside the Financial Times, in a page which is largely devoted to the Middle East, including some of what's happening in the hospital in Gaza that's been focusing so much attention. It also has a correspondent Guy Chazan in the West Bank talking to Jewish settlers and saying how that the 500,000 Jewish settlers in that area, in that occupied territory, how there's been a huge upsurge in violence in the week since October the 7th. The UN says Israeli forces shot and killed 8 people in the West Bank on Tuesday, bringing the death toll among Palestinians since October the 7th to 182, including 46 children. The Financial Times says some settlers who consider the West Bank to be part of the land of Israel feel vindicated by what happened on October the 7th. It strengthens our message that the battle here isn't just about territory, it is a religious conflict between Judaism and Islam. The FT says even before October the 7th, the West Bank, which has been under Israeli military occupation since 1967, is enduring its worst violence since 2005. And one Western diplomat is quoted as saying, "We're seeing a blurring of the division between the settlers and the Israeli Defense Forces because they often accompany the settlers when they go on the rampage."
And just looking beyond Fleet Street to some of the newsy magazines out today, The Spectator and New Statesman both have covers ruminating on the return of David Cameron. Andrew Martin for the piece in The Statesman, Tom Godfrey in The Spectator. The New European has a sepia-tinged image of a sinking Titanic with someone on board saying, "Has anyone got a number for David Cameron?" And this week's Private Eye has a picture of Rishi Sunak and Isabella Braverman at the Remembrance Sunday ceremony. She says, "We can't have extremist troublemakers at the Senate after," and Sunak responds, "Okay, you're fired." And on the question of Mrs. Sunak and how trouble the UNGP staff are in, I should tell you that's the subject of this week's Today podcast, which is just a few moments ago gone live. Nick and I look at that question and also a brief history of why parties revolt against their leaders, and we try to make sense of it through our best legal minds. Join consumption about Selena Kennedy, KC, search for the statement, BBC Sounds now.
It is coming up to 7:45.
Ridley Scott's biopic of Napoleon, featuring Joaquin Phoenix, has not gone down too well with some French critics. As the Times of London reported yesterday, French GQ said, Ridley Scott gets bored, and us too. There is something deeply clumsy, unnatural and unintentionally funny in seeing French soldiers in a fictional 1793 shouting "Vive la France" in an American accent.
I found the town of France in the cupboard and placed it atop my own head.
That's, I think that's from the trailer. Is that from the trailer? I think that is from the trailer, which is causing some amusement, and that is causing some amusement here in the same studio anyway. And that's Joaquin Phoenix playing Napoleon. Let's talk to Dr. Estelle Perron, who's Associate Professor in History at Northeastern University in London. Dr. Perron, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. Based on what you've seen, perhaps just heard from the trailers, are there significant and to you disturbing inaccuracies in this film?
Yes, there are, but this is a movie. It's not a documentary. So yes, there are. I think this is actually brilliant that we have this discussion, that we have historians making videos or writing about it, and rectifying the historical metrics. And myself, I'm always interested in historical shows because of it. I think it gives us a platform to share our knowledge and our expertise. But again, yes, it is a movie, so yes, one did not say those words in public, but apparently he did say them in private, and I thought it was genius to make him say that in public.
What do you make of the portrayal of Marie Antoinette?
Well, you know what? I really love Marie Antoinette in many ways. They did it really a little because he made her kind of fearless, spicy, and at that time, honestly, she was not. Her hair was cut. Honestly, don't care if her hair was cut or not. People seem to be so upset about it. But what I don't like is that her defiance, really. At the same time, it is Ridley Scott's interpretation of the event. I have no problem with it. The truth is that she was extremely sad and vulnerable. She's been accused of the worst incest with her son. And she tried to remain dignified at the end, but I don't think she would have been that bold. And obviously Napoleon wasn't there, but at the same time, I think it's to link the French Revolution to him.
What's
to explain the terror.
Forgive me for interrupting, Dr. Crook.
No, no problem.
As a historian, as an academic, would we be reassured if, for instance, Ridley Scott knew a call of another historian called and said, "Can I just check a few things with you?" Because there are some people who won't be familiar with the story who may see this as history when, in fact, as you say, it's an interpretation of.
I would have loved for you to give me a call. But yeah, and I think that's where as well so many friends are upset, and they're rightly, rightly so. I'm just saying something. This has history. I'm sorry, but that's their problem. They're wrong. They should not see this as history. You don't go to a cinema for history. You go to a cinema to be entertained. And I haven't seen the movie before. I've seen the trailers and the scenes. I was entertained. I was excited. And I've seen so many critics from the French press, which I absolutely love because it's so French.
Well, I'm glad you said that rather than me. Well, listen, next time Ridley Scott is on this programme, I promise we'll encourage him to give you a call. Dr. Estelle Franck, thank you very much for your time this morning.
It is now 12 minutes to 8, time for the daily written by the Senior Rabbi of Masonic Judaism.
Good morning. This time last week, I was sitting in Israel with a mother whose son had been murdered by Hamas on the morning of October the 7th. He died protecting his companions. She said, "I'm definitely going to continue my volunteer role, bringing Palestinian families to their hospital appointments in Israel, and I'm going to carry on with my efforts for our shared society." I asked her for the name of the NGO she worked for. "It's called Humans Beyond Borders," she said. I sat silent, struck to the heart by the courage of this bereaved woman. I'm a Jew, a rabbi. I have my loyalties, of course I have. Anyone with relatives under fire, anyone with friends of friends taken hostage must have. The Jewish community is one big, tightly knit family. I know that Palestinian families feel similar ties. Inseparable from my faith as a Jew is my loyalty to being human beyond borders. It can't be otherwise. When the one God whose presence I feel in my guts created all people equal in the divine image. Every life matters, and tragically, every death hurts. Even now, there are Israelis and Palestinians who stand together in affirmation of this truth, which Hamas does not respect. "We still phone each other," said another volunteer, after we'd taken a Palestinian family to their daughter's appointment at the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. There are grieving Palestinians and Israelis who bear incurable injuries, not to their bodies, but to their hearts, who've lost children to the horror. Yet they found each other, not in spite of, but through their very wounds. If that is possible there, can't we do likewise here? I've heard so often since that terrible 7th October, I feel alone, afraid, grief-stricken. There's a wall of silence. No one reaches out. Anti-Semitic and Islamophobic hatred has risen manyfold. I've heard those same words about fear and aloneness, not just from fellow Jews, but from Muslims. Paradoxically, the very feelings we experience as dividing us may unite us most closely. We don't have to take sides to say we care. A recent statistic suggests that 70% of Britons are concerned for innocent people on both sides. They want the hostages brought safely home and a dignified future for the people of Gaza. So can we too be humans beyond borders? If not, what future awaits us? In the Jewish calendar, we've entered the month of Hanukkah, the festival of light, courage, and hope. I dare to hope.
Rabbi, good to see you. That was Thought for the Day with Rabbi Jonathan. Time now, 9 minutes.
Keir Starmer needs to fill 10 positions in his team this morning. Shadow ministers and others were among the 56 Labour MPs, including a filter of the parliamentary party, who defied his instructions to vote for a Labour rather than SNP amendment on Gaza last night. The poll called for longer humanitarian pauses and siege conditions to be lifted, the latter for an immediate ceasefire. After a period when the Labour leader demonstrated his command of his party, this was a significant rebellion. And we're joined from Westminster by John Healey, the Shadow Defence Secretary. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
A clarification, first of all, of the 10 members of the front bench, who voted with the SNP. Some said already that they were stepping down from their role. Some hadn't. Have they been sacked?
When it comes to a parliamentary vote, not following a clear whip is an act of resignation in itself. Some wrote letters, some didn't. But I regret the fact that we lost any of our front bench colleagues last night. I know all of them grappled with this difficult decision, and I know all of them want to see Keir Starmer in Downing Street, and all of them will work their socks off to try and help secure a Labour government at the next election.
So understood all 10 of them are no longer in their post. Does their decision and their vote rule them out of a role if you form the next government?
Well, that's for well down the track. Our concern now, and the vote last night, was about what is the most practical way of trying to get some relief to the intense humanitarian suffering in Gaza and reduce the level of killings. But it was also a requirement to respect the right of Israel to defend itself after the huge Hamas terror attack, albeit
vein of human through the book, because I think sometimes when we're looking at very dark parts of our history and the history of the world, sometimes it's kind of to get us through these dark moments. And this book and what Gabriella does is that she puts all those elements of identity, sex, desire, shame, guilt in a wonderful story that's wrapped up in 185 pages. And it just grabs you by the scruff of the neck on page 1 and doesn't let you go until you finish it.
Kevin Duffy on the attentive, throat-grabbing, Undiscovered by Gabriella Bruno, translated by Julia Sanchez, and that's published by Pushkin. And that's all for today's masterpiece. Next week, Johnny Pitts is here with a truly international program taking in Nigerian megachurches, the Florida Book Band, and debut fiction from Sydney with writers Femi Kayode, Michael Connolly, and Alex Sons. Do join in there.
Open Book was presented by Chris Power. The producer was Nicola Holloway.
After the news, we continue our look at the life and work of Joni Mitchell. This week, it's 1970, and the musician is meant to be in LA promoting the release of Ladies of the Canyon. Instead, she's taken off for Europe.
BBC News at 4 o'clock. Scotland's Health Secretary has blamed his teenage sons for racking up daily charges of almost £11,000 on a Parliament-issued iPad while on holiday in Morocco. Michael Matheson, who has since paid back the money himself, told MSPs in Holyrood the device had been used to watch football matches. Our political correspondent David Wallace Lockhart says he had previously insisted the iPad had been used only for official business.
The more complicated part in all of this, the part that, let's be honest, is going to cause problems for Michael Matheson, is that means last Friday he was aware of the fact that the iPad had been used to watch football games. Since then, he's not gone public with that. He's maintained the line that it was used only for constituency work while he was away in Morocco, and we now know that wasn't the case.
Israeli forces have dropped leaflets over Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, warning people to leave their homes and head to shelters. Similar messages were dropped in the northern part of the territory before Israel launched its ground offensive. Downing Street has said that emergency legislation to help revive its Rwanda policy will be brought forward in the coming weeks. The Supreme Court ruled yesterday that the government's existing plan was unlawful. Derbyshire police has admitted that it failed a woman who was killed by a colleague months after she reported him to the force for stalking. Inquest into the death of Tracy Spinks, who is 23, found to have been unlawfully killed by Michael Sellers in Duck Mountain in June 2021. His body was later found a short distance away. 3 former and 5 current Metropolitan Police officers are being investigated for gross misconduct over the handling of the investigation of serial killer Stephen Ford, who murdered 4 men in East London between 2014 and 2015. The government says it wants to extend COVID support so that GCSE students in England get formula and equations in their maths and science exams for another year. Most students who are due to sit exams next summer were year 7 when the first national lockdown was introduced. BBC News.
The area surrounding the capital of Iceland, Reykjavik, has been experiencing an increase in volcanic activity recently. An underground river of magma has been observed.
In half an hour, the scientists monitoring the Pekingkelskyapula volcano will explain what this means to the country. And our health reporter Jim Reed has been attending the COVID inquiry to explain what we've learned so far and what to expect next week. And now on Radio 4, we join the singer-songwriter Jessica Hoop for the latest episode of Legend, the Joni Mitchell story.
Joni is waiting for the sun to come up. She's been awake for hours. The wind was high in the night, and each wave crashing into the shore sent a shudder through the cave walls. Everything itches. The heavy Afghan blanket she's borrowed to sleep on, the beach grass poking through it, the flea bites on her legs. The patch of sky she can see through the mouth of the cave is still deep, inky blue. She gets up, quietly, not wanting to wake the man beside her, and slips out onto the beach.
There were two big walls of caves on each side of a flat plain. And at night, they looked like the big tenement buildings because people would have little fires going in their caves, and all of the different levels would be lit up and kind of spots of light all over them.
I picture her, sitting on a rock in the salty air, looking out across the dark sea, lighting her first cigarette of the dawning day. Joni should be home in LA right now. She's just won her first Grammy for Clouds, and her new album, Ladies of the Canyon, is about to be released. So why is she hiding out in a cave on a Greek island? And will this lonely road she's traveling lead her to what she's seeking? I'm Jessica Hoop, and this is Legend, the Joni Mitchell story. Over 6 episodes, we're exploring the remarkable story of this pioneering artist and getting to know the life beyond the legend. This is episode 3, Blue. Joni's star has so rapidly ascended that sometimes she feels she can't keep up.
It's a long way from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan to Carnegie Hall.
In 1969, at her first solo show at Carnegie Hall, a fan gives her a huge paper heart with New York Loves You written on it.
It's a longer way back, you're right.
Joni's face is on billboards and on the cover of Rolling Stone. She should be happy, but she's feeling ill at ease. Writer Bonnie Hoskins.
She's starting to sort of already struggle a little bit with the level of attention she's getting. She's not enjoying totally playing live. It's exhausting. She doesn't sleep. When she felt that press attention and this curiosity about her and her relationships and how she fit in with CSNY and all this, it was getting too intrusive, sort of too much. She got too much acclaim too quickly.
In January 1970, she comes to London to play a concert at the Royal Festival Hall. The audience cheers so loud and long that she gives 2 encores. A review of the show in The Guardian reads, Joni Mitchell is better able to describe what it means to be alive today than any other singer. But Joni has begun to feel, in her words, a little whorish about selling my soul. She announces she's postponing all bookings indefinitely. I need a rest, she says. You need solitude to make anything artistic. And in February, she leaves to travel in Europe with her friend Penelope.
It was just during the release of Ladies of the Canyon, which is a fascinating thing to me that would not be allowed in this day and age, that you disappear in your publicity period.
Music writer Kate Mossman.
She's on the cusp of fame, and she's thinking about how you can marry art and commercial music. She's thinking about what kind of artist she is. Is she a folk singer? Is she going to be a star?
On their travels in Greece, people keep telling Joni and her friend they should check out this place called Matala. So Joni hires a beach-loving truck, and they set off.
Matala is a Cretan fishing village, which was known at the time for a series of limestone caves across the cliff, which were used as burial crypts by the Romans and as bunkhouses by hippies. They were decorated with Keenan rugs and stoves and lanterns, that would be left there as each occupant moved on the hippie trail.
There were a whole lot of people living there from all over the place, from France and Canada and the United States of America and England, everywhere. They used to eat at the Mermaid Cafe. Most people who didn't cook in their caves ate down at the Mermaid Cafe. They also did most of their drinking there.
It's here, in Matala, that she begins to write the songs for her groundbreaking album, Blue.
Just before I took our love, he said, I am as constant as the northern star. And I said, you're just as
Joni's traveling light and without a guitar, but she's learning to play a new instrument, an Appalachian dulcimer. Joni swims every day, seeks out shady spots to get to know her new instrument, and goes for walks with her sketchbook. It's not just show business she's taking a break from. She's also at a romantic crossroads with her boyfriend, musician Graham Nash.
We had talked about marriage. I think that John mistakenly thought I wanted John to cook dinner and wash clothes and, you know, all that domestic kind of stuff, which is the furthest thing from my mind. I would never have ever wanted John to be that kind of woman. But that's when our relationship became kind of disturbed.
Joni can't stop thinking of her grandmothers, both frustrated musicians, and the kind of lives they led. One of them came to the prairies with her gramophone and opera records, as Joni told Barney Hoskins in a 1994 interview.
She fancied herself cultured and she practically kicked the kitchen door like practically off its hinges out of her frustration. You know, being trapped in the role of a housewife. So, but the creative gene then fell upon me out of the third generation of the litter in a woman's form. You know, in a way you kind of have to safeguard that and do it for them because after 1965 it was really the first opportunity that women had had in history.
I was actually, strangely enough, laying down a new kitchen floor when a messenger came to the door with a telegram. And it said, if you hold sand in your hand and squeeze your hand, the sand will run out. I knew our relationship was over.
so hard to handle. I'm selfish and I'm sad. Now I lost the best baby that I am.
Although she's the one to end the relationship, many of the songs Joni writes at this time carry the pain of their separation and the awareness of her part in it.
I think one of the most striking things about Joni is how she articulates this conflict inside her between wanting to pair bomb, in her terms, but at the same time wanting to retain the freedom to ramble, to leave and not be tied down.
Joni fled to Matala to find solitude. She's famous enough by now that it's hard to get away from people.
She had a not necessarily desired entourage of 5 or 6 people wherever she went. They knew who she was and were interested in getting to know the artist, and some of them were quite sycophantic.
Enter Terry Raditz. He explodes into Joni's life, literally. She and her friend Penelope are on the beach when they hear an explosion. The back door of Delphini's, the nearest taverna, blasts open.
There was this guy standing there and he had a big turban on his head, and it was all white, kind of dirty whites, you know, wrapped around and around and around, and keeping off the top, you know, really wild red hair sticking up.
What an entrance, says Joni. I have to meet this guy. He turns out to be an American working as a cook. The propane tank had been filling up his kitchen with fumes when someone lit a cigarette and sent him flying.
I think of Terry Raditz as a rather handy archetype for the age of Aquarius. In those days, he was 23 years old. He wore heavy Afghan camise trousers. He was an original hippie.
That night, they drink at the Mermaid Cafe. Joni isn't much of a drinker, and after just 3 glasses of racket, she wakes up the next morning, alone, in Terry's camp. She goes looking for Penelope, only to find she's left with one of the soldiers from the night before. Joni won't see her again for many years. With Penelope gone, Joni moves in to Carrie's cave. It's small, and the bed is so narrow, they have to take it in turns to sleep on the floor.
The beds were burial crypts, so they were stone shelves 3 or 4 feet wide. If you think about, I miss my clean white linen and my fancy French cologne, that's where she was sleeping.
Terry Raditz himself hadn't said much about this time until in 2021. Kate Mossman managed to track him down.
With 50 years hindsight, Terry Raditz thinks that they were attracted to each other because they were both going through a kind of dark night of the soul. They didn't like people very much, and they had a massive temper on them, so maybe he was providing a contrast to the fawning interest that she was receiving from fans at that point. He almost became a kind of bouncer figure to her. He said that no one would come into his cave without asking, and so he kind of kept people off her back. She was attracted to his fierceness.
Terry is the red rose in Joni's song, California, and of course, the mean old daddy of Terry.
Come on, Carrie, get out your key.
At first sight, Carrie appears as a love song. It's actually a leaving song. She performed it to him on his 24th birthday in the cave, with 5 or 6 friends sitting around. That period of her life was coming to an end. She was going back to the business.
Joni plays just a few shows in the latter half of 1970, the Isle of Wight Festival, the Johnny Cash Show, a Greenpeace benefit, and 2 concerts with the BBC in London.
The song that James wrote is a lullaby. So beautiful.
At her side for many of these appearances is a tall, lanky, 22-year-old James Taylor.
Doesn't count for the end.
Yeah, that's how you up here. Why don't we form a duo?
They travel together through the summer and fall in love. Joni knits him a sweater, a huge striped thing with one sleeve 8 inches longer than the other. James's song Fire and Rain, about his time spent in mental institutions and the suicide of a friend, has made him famous. He's not quite sober, but the heroin addiction he's been battling for years is, in his words, going to take up running. The few concerts Joni gives in 1970 are received rapturously by audiences. Melody Maker magazine writes, she is fulfilling something of a goddess in of American rock, a woman who is more than a woman. Joni is still only 26 years old. They were putting me on a pedestal, and there was one, he said.
So when I realized how popular this was really, oh my God, a lot of people are listening to me. Well, then they better find out who they're worshiping. Let's see if they can see the let's get real.
In January 1971, Joni begins the recording sessions for Blue, her 4th album. She's in a raw, vulnerable state.
I could look at people without weeping, and there was almost a psychic thing where I could see through people, and I was sure that they could see through me. It felt like we were all celebrating.
Blue feels like a travel and a journey in pursuit of the self. It percolates with the freedom of high adventures. It also goes down the long, frozen river of heartbreak.
I love that it's never about them. It's never like, this is all joy, this is all sadness, this is all, it's just constant teaching us that we are all these things.
Musician Allison Wilson.
To me, she's such a secret. She's never saying with certainty, it's this, it's that. And it is her exploring her own caliber of humanity so honestly. Selfless wishes.
Joni said, I was demanding myself to greater honesty, more than revelation.
What he needs is to compare himself. You know, she is in because there's just no lip service. Love songs. They're sort of startling in their almost conversational nakedness. Just there, honestly.
One of the very few people allowed into the blues sessions is Joni's now boyfriend, James Taylor, who plays guitar on a few of the tracks. James is becoming a big star, and when they're out together, Joni can't help notice the girls making eyes at him, and she's never sure if he's still using them. They can't hold the hand of a rock and roll man for very long, she would later sing. They're on their way to meet James's family in North Carolina when Joni turns back between flights and leaves him at the airport. Maybe she sensed the wreckage of my next 15 years, said Taylor later. For the following year, he's married to Carly Simon. Blue is released in the summer of 1971.
My own peer group was horrified by it. Chris Christopherson, I played it freely with Joan really saved something of herself, because it was unprecedented in its vulnerability in a certain way, but it was all I was capable of.
Reviews of the album begin to talk about Joni's work as confession.
You know, the confessional label is inadequate for her. She always protested it herself.
Ann Powers is the author of a new biography, Traveling on the Path of Joni Mitchell.
Her own method more closely resembles the thought process than it does a confession. There's so many weird surprises in turns of phrase and like melodic shifts that evoke truthfulness because they are not precisely confessional. They're so much messier than what confessional implies.
After the release of Blue, the attention from the media and audiences, which Joni is already finding challenging, goes to another level.
In small, intimate venues, I always enjoyed it, but I never felt I could fill a big stage. And when I was up there, I always felt inadequate.
Bearing her soul to the huge beast of the audience is increasingly hard for her. She decides it's time to make a real attempt to get back to the garden. Joni finds her garden back in her native Canada. She buys 40 acres of land on the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia. On a plot of land at the water's edge, she builds a simple stone cottage, in her words, like a monastery.
It's a combination of caves in Greece, coffee houses in New York, and a prison cell.
Inside, the walls are bare gray stone, with a few Navajo rugs hung for decoration. There are wood floors, a low bed, and a few bookshelves. She lives there alone through the second half of 1971.
Basically sat and read loads and loads of psychology books. She read Freud and Jung and threw them all against the wall, she said. And the only thing that spoke to her, which says a lot, was Nietzsche.
She comes out of this period of isolation with a clutch of new songs that will become her fifth album, For the Roses, released in 1972.
Sounded like a chord. Took it around resounding for you way up.
On the title track, she describes the rustling of the arbutus trees outside her remote cottage. For a moment, the leaves in the wind sound like applause. For the Roses is my most treasured Joni album, something I share in common with my dear old friend, Guy Garvey, the lead singer of Elbow.
For the Roses is a one-on-one album. It's the sound of somebody on their own, talking to one person. She's up in the cabin on her own, she's fixing things herself. And even though the sentiment of the lyric of that song, it's not going to be fixed too easily, you know, she heartbreak, I thought, but there is a quiet, nesting positivity underpinning that song. Those backing vocals, those soft warbling, she's feeling good about being on her own, feeling strong, but she knows there's some work to do. I'm listening to somebody's heart breaking and mending when I'm listening to that album, and I think I am actually listening to that. The music as it came to her, being recorded as she felt those things. And there's something about the last chord of Woman and Heart and Mind, where she draws across the strings from the top to the bottom. And I imagine when you don't even try, it's almost like a flinging off of the last thread. Because actually, the end of heartbreak, I think, is when you get bored of being that person. When you get bored of feeling that way, bored of yourself and the way that you're reacting to the world. And there's something about that one chord being thrown over a shoulder that says to me, mend it.
Joni's sole companion at her hermitage is a big blue hen who, like her, surveys the water from the rocks beside the house. I'm happy observing water, Joni told biographer David Yappy, so that was my shrink.
My soul was recovering, sort of repairing itself. One day I dove off the rocks into the water, and I came up, it was like a black mirror, and all the trees were reflected in it. And as I burst the surface, I broke into laughter. I was so happy. And I think at that point I realized that I had healed whatever it was that I had been taken out of me by physics. That I was completely intact.
She had gone through an intense time of self-assessment, heartbreak, and returned to Los Angeles and really needed to have some fun.
The LA of 1972 that Joni was different to the Laurel Canyon scene of the late 60s. Her manager, Dave Geffen, is taking a share. He's renting a mansion from Juliet Lewis. Joni moves in.
Geffen is now like the potentate. He's the guy who's calling the shots and making it. It's the world now. Malibu, Bel Air, this entree into not just like rock and roll songs, but like Hollywood.
She's spotted out in the town with Hollywood playboys Jack Nicholson and William Big, friends who some say are competing to get her into bed. The glam, the egos, and neuroses of the Hollywood scene begin to feature in new songs.
All the people of this life, got a lot of style. Countries, passports, time and silence.
1974 is the first year since her recording debut in 1968 that she doesn't release a new album, as she plays only a handful of live performances. Instead, she begins planning ahead. She's looking for players who can keep up with her vocals and increasingly aggressive instrumental. Russ Kunkel, the drummer from Blue, and For the Roses tells her you need to work with jazz musicians.
The session scene was full of amazing players, both in New York and in LA. But Joni, her choice was to work with a specific band to really aim for that kind of connection and freedom that you get when you're playing with a band.
One night, she goes around to a club called The Liberty Boutique to see Tom Scott play his beloved jazz fusion ensemble, LA Express.
All of my friends had found the bands and were playing very well. And I was still searching for bands that would play to my satisfaction. I wanted to be a big one. So you say, jazz musicians can get that one.
With the LA Express, Dave begins to wonder how he knew that the next
To me, one of the greatest things that ever happened is Joni kind of figuring out that you understand in the LA session the sinuousness of it's just left so soft and sensual. not rock and roll, it's not quite jazz, it's certainly not pop. It's just Joni.
The stories that Johnny Mitchell tells on Corpse are fascinating in that they carry her as a character from the very intimate first person, which she always was trying to get away from instead, into this observer mode, which really interests her and accepts. So you have songs like Free Man in Paris, a rare song in which Joni speaks in the first person as a different character than herself. That song was inspired by David Geffen, by something that had been said to her. Why did Joni Mitchell want to become a band leader? She has the facility to make symphonies with her own two hands and with her voice. She doesn't necessarily need musical collaborators, as we all know, to make profound and expansive music. But being a band leader allowed her to step away from that blinding spotlight a little bit.
Joni has left her cave for a moment and is alone in this new musical community. With one of the members beginning to express the connection moves beyond the Band studio.
Brian told Henry Louis, sitting up facing the drummer, John Mayer and I just met. We lived together for some years after that. But he had this look in his eyes, when he played, and I said, you gotta set up a vocal facing the drummer because he gave me this fiery support.
Some audiences will still love solo folk Joni, even when they have direct, some would say smooth vocals. But Joni has moved on. She tells critics, I don't want to be vulnerable anymore. Joni has never liked labels, boxes, or genres, and now she's taken the chance to go beyond all that. Where will this desire for creative freedom take her? Will the audience follow? And will the gamble be worth the cost? That's next time on Legend, the Joni Mitchell story.
And you can hear that episode about the same time next week. The presenter is Jessica Heap and it's produced by Maria Bosworth.
Thank you for letting us in.
Letting you in. You've taken over.
Louis Theroux Interviews is back on BBC iPlayer. I've got a high tolerance for awkwardness, but yours is off the charts. I'll be having honest chats with some well-known faces like Anthony Joshua.
When I speak to Tempest, then you see the song. Big Tyson Fury, I'll be able to move.
Chelsea Manning.
I thought of myself as trying to solve the word rap now.
Dame Joan Collins.
I believe in marriage, which is why I've got a 5 times.
Louis Theroux Interviews. Watch BBC iPlayer.
Now, therefore, it's time for BBC Inside Science with Victoria Gill.
Hello, welcome to Inside Science. Remember this?
The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades, and this country is not alone. All over the world, we're seeing the devastating impact of this invisible killer. And so, tonight, I want to update you on the latest steps we're taking to fight the disease and what you can do to help.
I think most of us do remember. It's former Prime Minister Boris Johnson addressing the nation on the 23rd of March 2020. From that moment, we were in lockdown. That's definitely triggering some surreal memories for me. It's as if we all lived through this huge national experiment. Well, today we're catching up with the ongoing COVID-19 public inquiry, because next week it will hear from key scientific advisors who were in the room when decisions were made. But first, you may have heard rumblings this week from the Fagradalsfjall volcano in Iceland, and Icelandic listeners, please forgive my pronunciation there, but that volcano is thought to have been causing a series of earthquakes for the past 3 weeks, and volcanologists say an eruption could happen within days. For the people of Grindavik, a small fishing town sitting right on top of all this volcanic activity, it's been terrifying. The town has